Welcome, everyone. Our webinar is about to begin. Thank you for joining us today. I'd like to first introduce our President and CEO of BioCrossroads, Patty Martin.
Thanks, JoBeth. Welcome, everyone, to this, what we hope will be a very interesting session on tech transfer in Indiana, the road to commercialization. We are absolutely thrilled to have a number of guests with us today. We have representatives from the tech transfer offices at our major R1 universities, IU, Purdue, and Notre Dame, as well as 3 entrepreneurs who are going to share their stories with you. To kick us off, I'm going to introduce NORA Doherty, our Senior Vice President, and she's going to share a little bit about the genesis of this frameworks, which was a research report we issued late last year on the capabilities of tech transfer within our state. So Nora, I'm going to hand it off to you. Thanks.
Thanks, Patty. My name is Nora Doherty, and in my role at BioCrossroads, I've had the opportunity to learn and appreciate the way in which our research universities impact our lives every day. Next slide, please. In Indiana, as Patty said, we have 3 major research universities, IU, Purdue, and Notre Dame. Each year, their combined enrollment is enough to fill every seat in Lucas Oil Stadium about 2 times over. They train our doctors, our health professionals, our engineers, our business people, our teachers, and they produce innovation. They have thousands of research faculty working in all disciplines. And in 2019, together, they brought in nearly $1.4 billion to fund their research efforts. Next slide, please. Moving this innovation from university labs to the marketplace is the focus of tech transfer. Indiana's own Birch Beier led efforts in the United States Senate to create and pass what's been known as the Bayh-Dole Act of 1980 to support and encourage our research universities to engage in commercializing those discoveries that are made by the researchers working on their campuses. Now, while this was not the beginning of commercialization activities, Purdue, for instance, has been operating a research park since the 1960s. It did represent a significant moment in increased efforts in this area. This is especially important for advances in life sciences. Research and innovation in this area is inherently complex for good reason, and our universities play an especially important role in driving this innovation. Each of IU, Purdue, and Notre Dame have their own approach to how they translate this innovation to the market, but they're all focused on connecting great ideas to money and talent. The supplies of money and talent have been a constrained factor and continue to be so. However, I'm really encouraged by the long-term strategic investments that have been made and continue to be made by each of our universities. Next slide, please. With that, I thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to welcome our university representatives as they talk to you more about their processes and their approach. So thank you to Brooke Beier from Purdue University, Bryan Ritchie from the University of Notre Dame, and Simran Trana from Indiana University. Thank you.
Thank you, Nora. Please welcome our next speaker, Dr. Brooke Beier. She's the Vice President for the Office of Technology Commercialization at Purdue University. Welcome, Brooke.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. First slide, please. Perfect. So I'm Brooke Beier, Vice President of the Office of Technology Commercialization at Purdue, and our mission is really improving the world through Purdue technologies and graduates. Next slide. So Nora mentioned a little bit about PRF in the introduction, about a research park that was really set up in the 1960s. And PRF actually goes back farther than that. Actually, it got started in 1930. And the main mission has always been the mission of the university and to improve the world through Purdue technologies and graduates. I have a quick video that I'm going to kick off this presentation with that really highlights some of the changes in focus that PRF has had in the most recent years. So if you could click on that video, that'd be great.
At Purdue Research Foundation, we have one goal: advancing the mission of Purdue University. Since 1930, we've celebrated innovators, entrepreneurs, and researchers who use their time and talents to change the world. Through the creation of the foundation, Ross and Lily created PRF as a nonprofit and a separate legal entity to benefit Purdue by helping build its graduate school, moving university innovations to the public, and by providing valuable intellectual property.
Starting a few years ago, we sought to reinvigorate closer to David Ross's original vision. The organization we call PRF, it's now changed all its policies to be more faculty-friendly, inventor-friendly, sometimes student-friendly, in the pursuit of more innovation.
Today, Purdue is a worldwide leader in patents, in licenses, and in startup companies.
Purdue University's century and a half of history is filled with instances of Boilermakers who were a step ahead or maybe saw things a bit more farsightedly than their contemporaries.
Purdue Research Foundation continues to fuel the future through commercialization and innovation.
Our philosophy is to make it as easy and as common as possible for Purdue technology to find expression in the outside world. In the words of one of our great current inventors, it's not an innovation until it's useful to someone. That could be on the cornerstone of the Purdue Research Foundation. It is certainly the way in which it's operating, in which we hope to take to even greater heights in the years ahead.
PRF creates places for human interactions that are required to create advances that make the world a better place, and locates them adjacent to the university, so inventors, investors, industry, and government all have access to Purdue resources and talent.
Innovation happens when humans interact. That interaction is where you get a scientist that's soldering nanowires, speaking with a biologist, talking to a financier, and they come up with a new way to solve a disease or feed the world.
To advance our mission, PRF will keep innovation thriving for years to come.
The help we need from our ambassadors to help us thrive and do everything that we want to accomplish is to invite the captains of industry, the captains of investment to Purdue to see what we're doing in our ecosystem of innovation, because we know once they visit, they're going to want to stay.
Thank you very much for watching that video and playing it. I think it really highlights what PRF has been doing in the last couple of years to improve commercialization and placemaking within the state of Indiana and our local ecosystem in West Lafayette. Can we advance to the next slide, please? So these are some of the things the video touched on that PRF has been focused on to aid Purdue. So obviously managing and protecting Purdue intellectual property. That is something that I'll be talking about today. Making funding available for faculty, staff, and students. We do things such as the Trask Innovation Fund, which provides some gap funding and proof of concept funding for university technologies that we're trying to find a licensee for. We promote startup companies and entrepreneurial activities, especially through the Purdue Foundry. And we manage real estate. So there's a 400-acre development that's going on called Discovery Park District. The goal of that is to bring companies closer to campus and create that interaction that was discussed in the video and those collaboration and touch points. And we also work on facilities and managing gifts, trusts, and endowments. Next slide, please. So the ecosystem, you heard a lot about it already, but it all starts from at Purdue, just like any other university, the research and discovery and the people that create those. Our office works very closely with all the inventors on campus and understands their research programs and the commercial potential that are coming out of those. And when an idea is disclosed to our office and intellectual property is created, it goes to OTC, where we really focus on IP protection and licensing to industry and startups. Something that our office did a number of years ago is we split our office into two teams, a business development team and an in-house patent attorney team. And so each innovation that comes through our door gets assigned one of those individuals. And so the great thing there is the faculty or the student get to work with an in-house patent attorney that can, pre-COVID, go to their labs, understand the technology, see it, feel it, and work on claims and things like that. Right now, it's all being done virtual, which is something I'll talk a little bit about at the end of this. And those ideas get protected, and then we try to matchmake and commercialize those with industry partners and startups. If it is a startup, they'll work very closely with the Foundry, which is set up for startup education, co-working opportunities. We have the rail yard and real estate solutions such as Discovery Park District and the Research Park. Next slide. So some things that we've really been focused on the last couple of years is improving the number of licenses that we do each year, but making sure products get to market and not just chasing the metric to chase a metric. And so these are some of the things that we've been highlighted for in the last couple of years. We have about 400 disclosures a year coming through our door. So there's a lot of innovation happening at Purdue, and it's our job to make sure the world gets to see that as well. A couple of things to highlight: Purdue is ranked the number 5th most innovative school in the United States, and we are ranked number 15th in the U.S. universities for innovation impact from the George W. Bush Institute. We had 22 Purdue IP startups last year, and over 225 technologies were optioned and licensed. With the creation of our in-house IP team, we have been seeing an uptick in our ranking in the worldwide granted U.S. patents. So last year we were number 12, and we're hoping that we'll break top 10 soon. Next slide, please. So what's new since 2019? I think that's the last time we had a tech transfer kind of report to this group. So obviously navigating tech transfer during a pandemic, that's definitely changed the game. We actually moved into the Convergence building you saw in that video back in February 2020. I spent a lot of time designing the space, figuring out how to make it interactive with inventors, and then boom, pandemic hits. Now we've been remote. So I got about a couple weeks in that new space, but it's going to be there waiting for us and waiting to come alive when this pandemic ends. Purdue inventors have pivoted their research to combat COVID, whether it's personal protective equipment, therapeutics, diagnostics. Everyone kind of jumped on board and said, how can we help? We had to do a lot of our events virtual. So we had our virtual showcase last week, hashtag the State of Innovation, where we had Indiana, Notre Dame, Crane, and Purdue innovators pitch technologies and companies that are looking for licensees or investment. And I think this pandemic's really kind of leveled the playing field. So when you think about the East Coast and the West Coast, and how do you travel to those places and get the Midwest scene, we're able to do remote meetings now, and it's kind of become the new normal. So if anyone here is listening to this and would like to have a virtual Purdue Innovation Day, I'm happy to arrange that for you. Next slide. So focusing on a couple of life science deals that we've done in the last couple of years. These are a few. So Graham Cooks is very well known in the field of mass spectrometry. We did a pretty nice deal with Waters for a desorption ionization technique that actually stemmed from Prosolia, which was another Indiana story as well. Phil Lau's done a lot with a bunch of startups. So Emoja, Radivir, Morphimmune, and Novastio are four that stemmed from Phil Lau at Purdue. Emoja is focused on cancer therapies, retooling patients' immune system to enhance the body's natural capacity to fight cancer. Radivir has pivoted to really focus on the coronaviruses. Novastio, you're going to hear from Stu Lau in a little bit today about how they heal bone fractures quicker. And you can see the rest there, but the gist of this slide is that there's a lot of life science innovation coming out of Purdue, and that's going to these companies, and we're excited to help support them. Next slide. So a couple example technologies that are available from Purdue, and this is just kind of a snapshot. If you're interested to learn more, we're happy to talk, but this is one of Graham Cook's technologies. He actually developed, after getting a $9 million DARPA grant called the Make It program, a tool for drug discovery, and made it 10 times faster. So he's used it for rapid synthesis of small amounts of compounds and high throughput reactions, which can actually do about 6,000 samples an hour. And the way he describes this, to make sure that when you actually add A plus B, it does indeed form C. So he's very excited about this. We are too, and happy to talk to anyone that would like to learn more. Next slide. And then the purpose of this slide is just to show a snapshot of some of the biomedical and life science technologies that are awaiting a partnership. It can range from medical devices, wearables, diagnostics, therapeutics. The easiest way to find out about these is to go to the search available Purdue technologies at the very bottom, or just reach out to one of our business development managers. Like I said, they're the folks that manage these technologies and have the correct technical and business background to talk to you about them and hopefully try to match make and bring them to market. Next slide. And really to round this out, I think President Daniels, former Governor Daniels, says this the best. So our philosophy is to make it as easy and as common as possible for Purdue technology to find expression in the outside world. So I know that we're not doing our job if the research isn't making an impact in the world, and we're hoping that partners in Indiana, industry, entrepreneurs can help us make that happen. And last slide, please. And so here's my contact information. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I'm happy to follow up in a dialogue after this or any other time, and hope to see you at Purdue or at a virtual Purdue Day sometime soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Beier. Please welcome our next speaker from Indiana University. She is the Associate Vice President of Innovation and Commercialization, Simran Trana.
Good morning, everyone. And first and foremost, thank you, Patty, Nora, and JoBeth for the work that Pioneer Crossroads does to facilitate life science, technology development, and commercialization in Indiana. Your support and efforts are an integral part of IU's community resources, and we really appreciate all the support that we get from you. A particular program that I'd like to mention is the So You Have a Molecule program, which a number of our faculty have gone through and really benefited from, as well as others who have valued the mentoring provided through the Access program. IU's tech transfer operation has seen considerable change over the last 3 years. So I would like to just spend a minute to help everybody who's on this call introduce you to our new organization. At ICO, we are no longer part of the external organization that used to be known as IURTC, but we are now part of Indiana University under the umbrella of the VPR office, and as a result, much more integrated with university priorities. At ICO, we believe that next slide, please. At ICO, we believe that IU truly can be an engine of innovation and growth for Indiana, resulting in benefits that would translate to the global community. We hope to achieve this by extensive engagement with regional partners, entrepreneurs, industry, and the financial community, all of whom we are delighted are at the table today on this call. One of the primary drivers for ICO is to work closely with faculty to understand what they are trying to achieve. This is of critical importance because having an inventor who is a champion for his technology and has a passion to see its application is a critical ingredient for successful tech transfer. While the Tech Transfer Office can facilitate and certainly accelerate the development of the technology by assisting faculty make the right connections, the critical factor that the inventors look for are the inventor and the technology. Given the interest of the inventor and the translation of their technology may take place through many, many different avenues. Sometimes it may be something as simple as an open source license for many of our IT faculty given their priorities and focus. But most often, exclusive licenses are required to bring nascent university inventions to fruition. If we are able to engage with an existing company, that would be our preferred path forward as it allows faculty to stay focused on their research mission while allowing the parallel development of their technology by a knowledgeable partner. Unfortunately, the stage of development of university technology is always too early, and we often have to work with faculty to explore the startup path for technology development. Next slide, please. Over the last year, we have worked closely with faculty and the office staff to define our process, and a large part of the effort has been to get back to a full staff of commercialization managers at ICO. We have 8 commercialization managers now, the last of who started actually in January of this year, but collectively they have over 90 years of industry experience, and we look forward to applying that to work with our faculty to articulate clear commercialization programs for their technology. The success of our efforts will, however, rely entirely on our ability to connect with and engage industry partners, entrepreneurs, and capital sources in the community. We look forward to working closely with our regional partners to do so. With 16 Tech getting up and started and a lot of buildings coming online, we are also really excited about the opportunity that venture will create in IU, and we are looking forward to the opportunity to be a central part of that community to help connect faculty with resources available in the region. Next slide, please. IU has had a great history of successful technology commercialization. We look forward to continuing this tradition. Of particular importance to us is the assistance provided by IU to get 7 new IU-generated technologies off the ground. In addition to startups, we are also really grateful to the work done by our industry partners to bring IU innovation to patients. While this graph gives you a general snapshot of IU technology and innovation, I would like to focus on a particular invention that was launched in 2018 and has received broad market application in 2020. Next slide, please. Crysvita is a therapeutic that treats a genetic disorder that causes rickets and has been a groundbreaking treatment for patients across the globe. As you can see, it was a long time in development, and one of our focus areas is to see what we can reduce the time it takes to get these technologies to market. To do this, we are looking at integrating the resources IU has across all its internal programs. Next slide, please. As you're all aware, the genesis of a lot of university IP is NIH funding, and the university is doing everything it can to continue to grow that program. With the School of Medicine, this has been a major effort, and over the last 3 years, we've seen a growth of about 20% in medical grants coming through to IU. As those grants come through, the next part is really how do we get these new innovations to market? To do that, we are working closely with the drug discovery programs at the Simon Center and the Alzheimer's Disease Drug Discovery Team and the reformulated CTSI under Sharon Moe's leadership. The CTSI is developing a medical device and pharmaceutical review program, and that will bring people from many different disciplines necessary to evaluate, invest, and incubate new technologies. These teams will evaluate some of the disclosures that we have received, make sure that there is targeted advice given to faculty in development, and then also provide resources for the advancement of those technologies to the next go, no-go decision. We are really optimistic that pulling together all these ventures, along with the potential support that ICBI can provide incubation space for these new startups, will really reduce the time that it takes for us to get new technologies from lab to market. The goal is to essentially have, out of these programs, advanced and vetted opportunities to present for investment to entrepreneurs and investors that will accelerate product development and launch. While this slide is primarily focused on medical technologies, we are also working closely with Regenstrief Institute to identify and develop avenues for transfer of health tech related technologies as well. In addition to that, providing SBIR, STTR support for our startups and engagement with students through the Kelley School of Business, as well as the Shoemaker Innovation Center, which has been a key partner in helping students develop and commercialize their IP and take that to market. The infrastructure and the ecosystem provided by the Dimension Mill in Bloomington, as well as the development of 16 Tech at IU, I think are going to be key features for advancement of IU technologies moving forward. Next slide, please. Talking about tech transfer in IU would be incomplete without a mention of IU Ventures and the team led there by Terry Willie and Tony Armstrong. They are a critical resource for IU to help stand up and fund IU startups, as well as work with other IU affiliated companies started by alums or otherwise connected to IU. We are really grateful for their support and look forward to our continued partnership with IU Ventures to help commercialize IU IP. Next slide, please. Sorry, this is the last, yeah. This last slide is to simply highlight some faculty startups that have emerged from IU with support from the regional ecosystem. Kent Harlick, who was a key driver for Marcadia, will be joining us later to share his experience in working with Dr. DeMarchi and developing and being a serial entrepreneur who has developed a number of companies to take his highly innovative research to market. With this overview, I would like to thank all of you for your time and look forward to broader engagement with industry partners who are on the line, entrepreneurs, as well as investors who have called into this meeting to create an innovative technology that will generate value for all parties while contributing to a vibrant and innovative Indiana. I do realize I didn't put my contact information on there, but you can reach us at ico@iu.edu, and we look forward to our continued relationships. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Simran, for the great presentation. Please welcome our next speaker, Dr. Bryan Ritchie. He's the Vice President, and Cathy and John Martin, Associate Provost for Innovation at the University of Notre Dame. Welcome, Dr. Ritchie.
Thank you. And thank you, Jo Beth and Patty and Nora, for this opportunity. It's good to be with you today. Let's go to that first slide there. Let's go one more. So many have said this already, and I'm going to touch on this in a couple of slides, but one of the biggest challenges that universities have is how to take very interesting research and get it to a point where it can have an impact on society. And Notre Dame, like Purdue and IU, is thinking hard about this, about how the research that's being funded right now can actually be translated into ways that can make a difference for society. And as Notre Dame is fond of saying, to do good in the world at the same time. Go ahead, next slide. So this is something that the Brookings Institute said several years ago, and it said, in general, traditional technology transfer has been a failure. There was an interesting study that was done that showed that outside of small molecule drug discovery, the number of companies created from technology and IP from universities all the way through to exit has been fairly small. And part of the challenge has been that there's a large gap that happens between the point at which a technology is founded or discovered until the point in which it's actually taken to market. And we call this the chasm of chaos. It's a situation where there are a lot of challenges. Next slide, please. In many cases, what you'll have solutions that are looking for problems. You'll have teams without founders. You have technologies that have been proven at, let's say, the bench level or at a very small data information level and need to be proven out. We call this de-risking, needs to be taken from where it is and de-risked through milestones to a point at which it can be useful in the market. And the problem is that in many cases, without that work, you've got a lot of bad fits. You have a lot of things that in many cases aren't market ready. And even though you might be able to protect it from an intellectual property standpoint, you don't have the opportunity to really find product market fit and get it to a point that people can use it in the marketplace. Go ahead, next slide. So what is the solution? Well, if you think about the process of taking something from the point of discovery until it's ready for the marketplace, innovation really is more about the process than it is about the idea. I can't tell you how many times we have people who will come and say, well, I don't really have an idea. Well, ideas are a dime a dozen. We have lots and lots of ideas. The challenge is executing against those ideas and getting them to a point where they can be used. So next slide. So we've put together what we call the engine. This is a 3-stage process, and I'll just tell you a little bit about it pretty quickly. When we get a disclosure, regardless of where that comes from, whether it's from faculty or from students, and in some cases even from alums or from the community, we run this through this 3-stage process. The first stage of this process is to do a risk assessment, and it's fairly simple. We do a risk assessment around the intellectual property strength and also around the size of the market. You might be interested to know that somewhere between 40 and 60% of everything that comes to our doors will fail on those two questions. Is there a strong intellectual property position, and is there an addressable market that makes sense? And even an addressable market that might be a beachhead market many times causes these technologies to fail in the sense that there's not an opportunity there to move that forward. I think for a long time at many universities, it was standard that you would patent whatever you could. And increasingly, universities are recognizing that the cost of patenting is not worth doing unless there's something that can be, there's a market for which that technology is going to be useful. So we ask those first two questions. As I said, somewhere around 40 to 60% will fail at that stage. For the technologies that pass that, we move into what we call our de-risking stage. And there are three phases to this stage. The first phase is we do a product validation, a technology validation stage, where we find out, is the technology actually viable? And this includes things like prototyping, proof of concepting, getting minimum viable products created, getting it to a stage where we can take it to a customer and get their feedback. We find that many technologies that work at the bench level don't work or don't scale as you try to get them to a level that work for a customer. And so this is an important validation stage. This can also be used in life sciences as you think about, getting them through each of the stages as they move toward the market, including regulatory, including early clinical trials, clinical stage trials, whether they're animal studies, working them through human trials. Whatever the case might be, you're moving them closer to the market as you validate and get data at each of those stages. We also do a lot of work here with customer validation and product market fit validation in terms of making sure that the product is what the market needs. About half of the technologies that make it into this de-risking phase. So I was just finishing up on this 4-cylinder as we get through this de-risking phase. Those that make it through there and about half do. We'll get into what we call enterprise acceleration. And this is where we are really forming teams, making sure that we have management for the startups, making sure that we have boards of directors and governance, and getting unit economics appropriate. And then also funding is an important part of this enterprise acceleration. And something that I'll talk about in a minute in terms of what we've done to try to address those funding needs. So from this process, we've had a number of life sciences, both licenses and startups. Over the last year, we've had several that I think are very interesting. Just a few here. CMP Scientific that's doing new utensils and mass spectrometry instruments, mass spectrometry analytical instruments. SalvePeds is a very interesting company. Therapeutic is now topical medication to treat diabetic wounds, making a lot of progress. Aopia Biosciences, new technologies identifying bio-nanoparticles. Claris Genomics is interesting from a technology from prognostic and diagnostic tools, tracking both breast and cancer progression, and molecular targeting technologies that are doing some very interesting things with infrared dyes. We have a number of other companies as well, and technologies like the other universities that are available for license and also for startup. In many cases, as I'm going to talk about in a minute, we have tremendous opportunities for operators and for founders, entrepreneurs who are interested in helping us with these companies. So if you feel like you have expertise in any of these areas or would like to look at our companies and help us run those, we'd love to talk with you about that as well. Next slide, please. Just a couple of things that we have found in the ecosystem that we work in that we need. One of the things that, oftentimes people will talk about the financial resources that are necessary to fund these companies. And while those are important, we found equally difficult challenges around founders and operators. Indiana is building a coterie or a group of entrepreneurs, but we're not where we need to be in terms of the number of founders, operators, and entrepreneurs. So I would make the invitation to those people who think they want to own or run a business, especially those who have been in the life science area, have expertise in certain spaces that would like to run their own company. We'd love to talk with you. We're also in desperate need of mentors and advisors that we can get engaged in our companies, either to sit on boards or to be mentors and advisors to those founders and to those startup entrepreneurs. We've started to do a couple of things there. In many universities, they have what they'll call an entrepreneur in residence. We've taken that one step further where we're actually hiring the early CEOs, getting them engaged with companies, and then helping them to transition with those companies and move them out to be a part of that company. Oftentimes, they'll start as the founding CEO. Sometimes as those companies get investment, other CEOs will be necessary for other stages of the company's development, but oftentimes the early CEO will remain as either biz dev or a CTO or a CSO or some other role in the company. And then what we're trying to do is for those founders and entrepreneurs who exit their company to come back and pick up another one. So we'd make the same invitation to those entrepreneurs or founders who have successfully exited their company, invite them to come back and pick up another company and take it out. And we have many that could use that help. Go ahead, next slide. The pandemic has had an interesting impact on our operations. As has been mentioned, almost everything has moved to virtual, including our demo days. And if you'd like to participate in those with us, we'd love to have you. If you'll let me know, I'm at Ritchie@nd.edu. Would love to get you connected to our ecosystem and have you see what technologies we're working on and be a part of that with us. We're seeing a steady increase in the number of disclosures. We've had over 950 disclosures from students this year, over 60 from faculty. The number of licenses and investments in company formation has remained steady, continue to increase. There's no question that some of our companies have run into headwinds, especially consumer products companies, but an equal number have experienced tailwinds. And interestingly, many of our life science technologies have experienced real tailwinds at this point in terms of research around things, virology, COVID, PPE, other things that have been mentioned. Go ahead, next slide. So what is our vision for the future? We really believe that we can have an impact on the amount of technology that gets to the marketplace. We're very closely aligned with the other universities in our area, IU, Purdue, others that want to have an impact. We believe that we can meld and connect entrepreneurship education to the number and quality of those student entrepreneurs and the number of technologies that we're developing. And also, we think that increasing the number of startups resulting from research from faculty and students is the key to getting the ecosystem that we want to develop to grow and progress. Go ahead, next slide. So what has progress been to date? Over the last 4 years, we've started 115 companies. We closed a $23 million ROI fund that we run as the general partner inside the university. I'm not aware of another university doing this. I think it's very influential and leverageable. We've funded 31 companies so far to this point. We have a 4.65 out of 5 on the NPS satisfaction score. It's about 94% on a regular NPS score. As I mentioned, over 950 students have submitted ideas. We're on pace for 100 faculty disclosures. Like Purdue, we also run buildings here and have companies. We have about 69 companies now inside our buildings. We have plans now to complete 3 to 5 more of those buildings. And many of you have participated in Idea Week. We get about 23,000 people per year who participate in Idea Week up here, which is a celebration of entrepreneurship and the progress of the ecosystem here in North Central Indiana. Go ahead, next slide. So just as a last invitation, if you have not connected with Notre Dame, much has changed here over the last 5 years. The focus of becoming a Tier 1 research university and having real impact in the world from that research is a real focus. And the Idea Center is positioning both the university and this ecosystem to do that. We're very actively engaged with Purdue and IU and want to be a good partner with all of those founders, entrepreneurs, and investors who are interested in this space, and would invite you to connect with us as we go forward on this mission. And thank you very much for the time. Again, apologize for the interruptions, but appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. Thanks.
Yes, Dr. Ritchie, very sorry for that. Thank you for working through that with us and still getting out the great information from Notre Dame. We really appreciate that. So please welcome our next speaker and the moderator of our panel, Danielle McDowell. She's the managing director of 1776, who is now located at 16 Tech. Danielle, I'll let you take it away.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate all of the great work going on in our awesome universities that surround Indianapolis. So a little bit of background and history on 1776 and the work that we are doing. We are housed and set to open on March 1st in the 16 Tech district of Indianapolis, which is just north of downtown. What it is that we do as an organization is work to be a connector, essentially helping to be a part of the ecosystem and fabric of specifically the life sciences and the tech transfer ecosystem. We do partnerships with a number of the different universities and have active discussions and work alongside the majority of universities that are here, and have some really fantastic partnerships both with IU and Butler, of whom are going to be housing inside of our space inside of the what's called the HQO building in 16 Tech. So what it is that we're doing at 16 Tech in the building is really looking to build a network and a community of entrepreneurs. And we do that in a number of different ways, but most importantly, and at our core, what we do is we share space. The second thing that we do that's really critical to the ecosystem building that we are doing inside of 16 Tech is essentially providing a series of knowledge sharing through programming and events that we provide inside of our building. From an offering perspective, we have about 54,000 square feet of office space, and we are housed alongside of Indiana Biosciences Research Institute, of which we also offer up shared lab space and house a number of different biosciences startups. To give you guys a little bit of an example of some of the work that we've done over time, 1776 has been around for about 8 years, and really our core competency is, 2 items, again, space management, as well as ensuring that there is a knowledge transfer that happens between experienced entrepreneurs and emerging entrepreneurs. We also have a location at the University of Penn called Pennovation. And I wanted to share a quick story of some of the work that we've done there. They are really focused in on specifically manufacturing and advanced manufacturing and drone work as well. And one of the companies that was able to come out of the University of Penn is a company called Verge Aero, and you might have seen them. They provided the drone show that was put on when President-elect Biden was announced as our president-elect. It was a really neat show, and also a fantastic example of what a company can do when they go from being housed inside of a research institute and then being commercialized and brought into a network where they're able to take that idea and that proof of concept and really take it to market. So that is the work that we do at 1776. If you guys have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. I am available both on LinkedIn. Also, I have a Twitter handle. It's just at Danielle Indy. I would be happy to provide a tour for you of the spaces inside of 16 Tech and HQO, as well as the labs, the shared lab space that we are housing inside of that district. And so next, what we will be doing is having a panel. And so what I'd like to do is introduce Roy Stillwell, excuse me. His company is called Nearwave, and he is a company that has come out of my alma mater as well, the University of Notre Dame. So take it away, Roy.
All right, there we go. Yeah, thanks for the introduction there. Danielle, and thanks Joe Beth and Patty and NORA for the invitation. This is very cool. So yeah, my name is Roy Stillwell, the CEO and chief scientist for Nearwave, and we're building a handheld imaging device out of a lab, Dr. O'Sullivan's lab at the University of Notre Dame. Next slide. And so we're addressing essentially a couple problems, sort of short-term and long-term, with some really cool technology. And essentially the first one is we call neoadjuvant chemotherapy, which is a type of therapy that you undergo before surgery, for example. What we're trying to do is like shrink a tumor, for example. And right now, there's not really any imaging systems that are designed or used to monitor your response to that chemotherapy. So you'll typically get therapy, and you'll continue taking that chemotherapy over the entire time period. And there's a lot of reasons why that's an issue, but we think we can sort of help in that space. And then a long-term, sort of our pie in the sky idea, our big social impact here is we think we can help in moving as many of these mid to late stage cancer stages into early stage type of detection. So we can do some cool stuff with benign versus malignancy detection, and reducing costs. On the right here, there's some figures about cost of early stage versus late stage, and obviously late stage is going to be more expensive. And we think we can improve that outcome as well as reduce the cost for, let's say, for example, chemotherapy. Next slide. And so our big kind of claim to fame here is this guy. We can predict chemotherapy response within 7 days. So one of the cool things we can do with that is we can change your therapy to something else that your body is responding to, versus keeping a single regimen. And there's some images of what are a type of images our device can make. On the left here, so someone's gone through some versions of imaging here over their treatment. Next slide. And so this is what our device looks like on the right-hand side there. It's a little handheld device. It'll be around $3,000. So if you're in the imaging space, that is crazy inexpensive. So what we're looking to do is kind of democratize this imaging, to be passed out. So it's non-invasive. It uses low-power laser light, and we can do all kinds of sort of fancy stuff here that I'm sort of outlining here on the left. But the big takeaway is that the cost is much lower than devices that are out there right now. Next slide. And so we have a great team, some experts in the field. We've got a number of advisors that have FDA regulation experience, which is a big part of this, technology development, and a number of our academic collaborators that we are working with for clinical trials and the whole 9 yards. So we're really excited about this technology. We're the most recent winners of the McCloskey competition, if you folks know of that, Notre Dame. We won some Elevation Regional Awards as well, and we're nominated for the Mira Innovation Award for Indiana, which is very cool. So we're super excited. We're doing a seed raise here in the next 2 to 3 months, and so this is in your wheelhouse of investment portfolio. Feel free to reach out. Would love to chat with you. I'm just excited to be here to talk to you guys. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That was such a fantastic, really interesting work coming out of your company there. Thank you so much, Roy. Next, we have Stu Lowe, who is from the University of Purdue with Novestio.
So Novestio is a company that basically, we have a platform technology that approaches helping bone diseases be cured quicker. And essentially what it is, it's a targeted platform. And we're able to engineer various small molecules, peptides, any known drug to be very specific to and have a very strong tropism to bone fractures, bone disease. We focus primarily on bone fractures. And the reason for this is that even though bone fractures, you think of your first bone fracture that you have in your life, and it's probably when you're a kid, you fall when you're, playing with people, whatever, you end up not being able to swim for a month, but it's not a big deal. But as we grow older, bone fractures become a bigger problem. It can be a workplace problem where you're out of work for a while. And as we age, we get older, and people eventually get to the point where bone fracture can be life or death. About a quarter of people with lower extremity fractures when they're over 65 will actually die from that broken knee, broken hip, and so on. And so what we're trying to do is help those bone fractures heal faster. Our technology is pretty simple to understand from the pictures on the left. Essentially what we do is we engineer drugs, as I say, to go specifically to disease states of bone. We can see a normal drug, a free drug on the left, these two mice, and then our targeted platform on the right. And we've radio-labeled two drugs, and we've injected them into these mice that have femoral fractures. Normal drugs, they circulate through the body, they're excreted, just like a regular drug that affects all over your whole body. On the other hand, our targeted drug, basically, once you inject it, you can inject it systemically, and it goes very specifically to bone fractures. That's not a local injection that you can see there. It's a systemic injection at a distal spot. This allows us to help bone fractures all over the body, all sorts of different bone fractures, bone grafts, spinal fusions, all sorts of different disease states where you would want additional bone growth. We're right now getting ready for clinical trials. We've been moving through, we've moved from the SBIR and seed round funding through now we've finished Series A. We've been pushing our drug through all of our IND enabling studies and hope to get to clinical studies this summer. So very excited about this technology. We think we can help a lot of people. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Stu. Fantastic work and very exciting, and good luck with all of that. Next from Indiana University, we have Kent Harlock with MBX Biosciences.
Thank you, Danielle. Could you please put up the first slide? Thank you. And you can advance to the next one. So MBX is a preclinical stage biopharmaceutical company based in Carmel and focused in rare endocrine disease. It was co-founded by IU professor and serial entrepreneur Richard DeMarchi, Tim Knickerbocker, and me. And we are really translating technology, which Richard has been optimizing in his lab in Bloomington for more than a decade. And with this, we hope to deliver a pipeline of pharmaceutical drugs that have commercially validated molecular targets and substantial unmet need. So last summer, we raised a $35 million Series A round, and thank you to IU Ventures for participating. We had a few of the coastal biotech VCs also joining that round. And this will fund our pipeline of discovery stage program or programs through to important development milestones. Next slide, please. So Richard DeMarchi and his colleagues have played a transformative role in the endocrine field. And just citing a few of his accomplishments in this field, going back to his work at Lilly, where he co-invented Forteo and as well invented Humalog. These are two blockbuster Lilly drugs, which have helped countless people affected by osteoporosis and diabetes. And as well, he co-founded Marcadia and MB2, which pioneered multi-agonist of incretin receptors to treat diabetes and obesity, as well as Calibrium, which was also in diabetes. And these companies, which in-licensed IU technology and intellectual property, really created extraordinary value for patients and investors. And they resulted in successful exits through acquisitions by Roche and Novo Nordisk. And MBX is recreating the structure of these previous companies based on a research collaboration with Indiana University for chemistry, drug discovery, an extensive use of academic and clinical labs for preclinical and clinical studies. And a majority of our team we've worked with at prior companies. So that's one of the fun parts of working at MBX. Next slide, please. So this is my last slide, and I just want to peer under the hood a little bit of our technology and how it's differentiated. So fundamentally, our platform technology controls the appearance and clearance of drug. And this allows lower and less frequent dosing. weekly, even monthly dosing, potentially oral administration. So this technology really serves as the basis for designing novel peptide therapeutics that have substantially improved efficacy, safety, and convenience for patients relative to native hormones or even other time action extension techniques such as pegylation. So our ambition really is to create a pipeline of therapeutics using this technology now focused in rare endocrine disease. So if you look at the incretin hormone field where Marcadia played previously, we witnessed a similar or analogous progression, starting with Beier, which launched in 2005, which required twice daily injection with a GLP-1 analog, to just about a year ago, the launch of the first oral GLP-1, which is Rybelsus. And so that progression is one that we would hope to sort of leapfrog with our technology, again, focused in different areas involving rare endocrine disease. So if you're interested in learning more about this, there is a video which IU Ventures produced, which you can find on YouTube, and as well our website is mbxbio.com. Thank you for your attention. That's all I have in this presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Kent. And if all the panelists could turn their cameras and mics on, that would be great. Roy, Stu, and Kent, thank you so much. And now we will move into the panel discussion. So if any of you have any questions for our panelists today, please don't hesitate to use the chat function to be able to ask those questions. I'll be monitoring the chat function and will relay those questions on. But one of the first questions here I would like to throw out to the group is, what is the most valuable lesson you've learned through your process at your respective tech transfer office?
Yeah, I'd say, you know, in terms of challenges, or some of the most valuable lessons that we have sort of learned, I think at least for us, the biggest one was learning to work really closely with your technology transfer offices. We work with James Thompson, one of Bryan's colleagues there at on staff at the Idea Center, and they've been great in terms of helping us organize the company and exactly who we should work with folks from Indiana, helping staff our groups. There's just an enormous amount of resources there, and just learning to sort of reach out and ask those folks. In the science side, you're used to digging into all this stuff yourself, and it's helpful to sort of let the experts do their job. So we learned a lot in sort of doing that, having to reach out with folks, and we've benefited entirely because of having access to those folks.
We've had I think one of the things that was the biggest adjustment for me coming from academia, moving through the tech transfer process was, in academia, you relate to people that are basically all motivated by the science. It's always science, science, science. And you learn who to trust, how much you can trust them according to science. And understanding that in business is a really different kind of thing. It's not, I think the science motivates, and I think helping people motivates, but for a person in academia, that's a big jump, trusting somebody in the business setting. And so I think that the tech transfer office, at least at Purdue, kind of got you, working with more and more people in the business area, business realm, and you realize that you have a lot more in common. Getting to that tech transfer office, that's like the big first step, right? Is that you have to be comfortable to that point. And if you're here, you're obviously have made it to that point. But after that, getting connected and really building those relationships where you can see that you have mutual goals and that you can trust each other, that's a really big hurdle that I think the tech transfer office helps at least me out a lot with.
Great, thanks, Stu. Kent, any insights?
No, I would just stress what Stu said, the importance of relationships. I just found it was so much easier with each progressive company working with Indiana University. And it's the relationships, it's just understanding how tech transfer operates at those places. And I guess talking to companies or talking to entrepreneurs who have been through it can help guide.
Absolutely. It's great to have those mentors and resources at your fingertips. And also, I think, being a tech entrepreneur myself and having a history of being a part of these startup ecosystems, it's really about that network and being able to tap into people that are there to assist you. So, going along that line, can you talk a little bit about some of your trusted advisors and mentors, and how did you find them and bring them into the fold? Go ahead.
I guess one of my biggest mentors was my father, Phil Lau. You started Endosite and a couple other companies, but basically we had started this company together as I had some technology and he had a bit of know-how. But we also had others. Dan Hassler got involved very early, and then Wade was my entrepreneur in residence over at Purdue, who is here right now, I think, listening in. But that mentorship process was extremely important, especially because we were able to, when you're first starting out, there are a lot of connections that you just don't have. I think some people who have been through this process many times, their infrastructure's set up. But for me, it was, who do I talk to about this? And again, since I trusted Wade, I trusted who he said I should talk to. Just being able to have somebody to really lean on helped so much.
Great. Roy or Kent?
Yeah, maybe, on sort of our side, so, we're still very early, essentially pre-seed, and, have no idea who to talk to in any of these spaces. And, similar to Stu, coming from academia, that it's making that transition is definitely, you definitely have to sort of expand your edges. And so for us, it seemed like, at least just, in the ecosystem that we have been fortunate enough to jump into with, the Idea Center, and with, in particular, like the McCloskey, these sort of like business competition stuff. It's, they're fairly small in terms of, funds in the sort of grander scheme of companies. But what they did offer us is, hundreds of inbound connections. And so we were able to filter those through, okay, I have these 10 folks that are, that I'm interested in talking to. What do you guys think? And so we were able to get most of our advising groups from those systems, essentially. We also had a similar thing with Elevate Ventures. And so I bounced a number of questions. I spent a lot of my time asking questions. Maybe Stu sort of suggest, with our advisors. And most of them have come from around those, for us anyway, sort of these sort of small scale, competition kind of a deals, which is sort of kind of where we got our foothold started.
Okay. Well, an important mentor of mine is somebody I've known most of my life, and it's Jim Cornelius. And he recruited me back home to work with him in a private venture fund, Twilight Venture Partners, which is kind of still active. And the purpose was to start and lead life science companies. And so many people think about Jim in terms of his role with Fortune 500 companies like Guidant and BMS, but really he has a lot of experience on emerging life science company boards. And so he's really an ideal mentor. He's also, fortunately, an independent director of MBX. So that's something I would recommend to entrepreneurs is really bring somebody on your board that you just have a long history with, that understands you and vice versa, but is also experienced and can help you as your company scales. So I hope that MBX eventually will become a commercial biopharmaceutical company. And then a lot of his larger company experience will be quite relevant.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And Roy, I can empathize with you, or I guess relate. Elevate Ventures was one of the investors in my company, and they are a fantastic resource. They are phenomenal at connecting. And, I would encourage all of you who have budding ideas, don't hesitate to reach out to the venture community. Indiana is a really strong network here. So fantastic. So moving along those lines, what advice would you give to other researchers who are aspiring to take an idea to innovation? Stu, you seem to be really great at going first, so I'm going to pick up.
I'll go first. I'd say build a team. It's all about the team. You look at, goodness, there have been several huge Series A financings that have happened in recent years where there almost wasn't an idea, there was just a team. And I think that, coming from academia, there's going to be an idea, but get experienced people. You'll have some people who will be young and very, thirsty for, getting stuff done, and that will help a lot. But having some experience in there and people, I hate to say it, just some name recognition there really helps investments come. It also helps with making sure you don't make a lot of mistakes along the way, and that's why there are investments that follow teams.
Yeah, I would echo what Stu says there. Yeah, team is super important. We still learn early that having the right people with the right connections is everything. We've had so many introductions to folks, even in the technology space, that we've become tight collaborators with. That sort of came from having just such knowledgeable people on the team. So 100% agree with that. The other thing I would say is that, especially going from research, to some kind of development, that it's something you want to look into, and having good advisors will help with this. But exactly how that process goes and what the standards are around that. So let's talk about licensing, or when you're talking about how much equity to sort of allocate, those type of questions, like normalizing that and asking folks around. That's something you'll want to get in early, in particular if it's an undergraduate type of student. Depending on what the IP policy is for universities, they're significantly different than graduate students working, and so your IP claim might be slightly different than other ones. So just making sure that you reach out early, to the tech transfer team, make sure that that's sort of squared away.
Nothing more to add.
Avoiding the mistakes, I call that the stubbing of the toe effect. So if you are able to avoid those mistakes that previous entrepreneurs have made, and you can avoid stubbing your toe, it really is a fantastic way to leverage some of those knowledge bases for sure. Fantastic. Well, I have one last question for you guys before we close out here. What were some of the areas where you wish you might have had some more support?
I'll go first. We're growing really quickly, and we're looking for highly experienced drug developers, all different aspects. And we want, ideally, our team to be located here. Appreciate that there's a lot more tolerance for telecommuting and technology to facilitate it, but we'd like to build our team locally. And we know that there are talented, experienced people out there, but there's really not a central clearinghouse for these folks. So we've been fortunate to even recruit back Lilly alums. I think of our chief medical officer who joined about a month ago, coming back from North Carolina, had worked at Lilly for about a decade, but we actually had to pay a recruiter to find Mary Jane. And so informally through our network, we've got names, but I would love to see more organized keeping track of people who have the kind of experience that these growing biotech companies need in central Indiana.
It's a great recommendation.
Yeah, and for us, maybe to jump in, I think the part that's really hard for us is also in that sort of experience realm, in particular FDA. Who do we talk to that knows what FDA pathways look like for med devices? Because that's, you know, the sort of pathway we're doing. And you know, that's still you know, that's still an opportunity for us. I think a lot of folks doing sort of what we're doing, this type of development. It's a tricky thing to do, and it's a sort of expensive thing, you know, if you go about it the wrong way. So we're trying to avoid those problems. But so along those lines, yeah, you know, sort of a pool to bring folks like that on that have that kind of long, you know, multiple company exit experiences to help sort of guide us. That's definitely been tricky to do, in particular employees that are willing to do that, you know, to join with that kind of thing. That pool is also a little bit difficult to find. So maybe echoing, you know, what he's saying.
I agree with those things fully. I think that that's pretty much what I would say. Just to give another point of view, I guess, something that I think that my group was fortunate enough with was to have some good, again, mentorship early on. And so we were a little bit more aware of, you know, the tech transfer process. But I think that seeing a lot of other university teams at various universities, the concept of how to really protect your IP is a difficult one. You know, you think of your project, you understand your project, but getting that concept and figuring out, you know, where all you need to go to, what all you need to do to protect that intellectual property is something that's not necessarily intuitive. And, you know, there's some communication errors you have to always work with. We worked with some great attorneys at Purdue, but we still had to say, listen, this is our plan. And what do you think? How can we cover our plan? How can, you know, and getting that plan together early on, I think really sets you up for, it'll make your life a lot easier later on when you're talking to companies, when you're talking to investors, potential partners, whatever it might be. If you can say, listen, we have a really solid intellectual property plan. You know, everybody's talked about the team. You have a solid team. I think you're in pretty good shape if you can really get those two things together. So really be vocal and be proactive about your intellectual property.
Fantastic. Thank you guys so much. That's some great advice. And also, you know, I'm going to throw in the shameless plug that that's what we are really working to do at 16 Tech is really develop a community of people and talent of whom are dedicated to advancing innovation. And so I really hope that you guys are able to come visit us here in the Indianapolis area. If you are in the area, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to give you a tour. Not only do we have some office space and shared lab space, it's also alongside an artisanal marketplace of which has about 24 food vendors. And it's alongside a makerspace as well. So if you're into laser cutters and 3D printing, you can come play with some of the toys that we have over there, which is really exciting. So I'm going to ask one last question. We have a couple more minutes here. If you could go back in time, let's say 3 to 5 years ago, and give yourself just one piece of advice, one line, maybe two, maybe I'll allow two lines of advice, what would it be? That one wasn't on the sheet, so you guys weren't able to prepare for it. Anybody?
Don't be afraid of risk.
I can be afraid to change. You know, I think of a previous company, not in Indiana, in San Diego, but you know, we started out with one type of technology and we stubbornly adhered to it when really a better iteration of the technology was right under our nose. But we similar to what Stu said, we just were reluctant to change course. So be flexible.
Oh, I love that one. I have that as a magnet on my fridge. My company pivoted twice and changed names twice, so I can appreciate that one.
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Oh, can I just, sorry, I agree with what he said, with what Ken said. I just, for the risk thing, you know, I was very much 5 years ago, I was planning on working for, you know, a large company kind of thing. There are a lot of entrepreneurs in my family, but I really wasn't one of them. But it's been a fantastic ride. It has been an absolute blast to learn so many new things and to get the entrepreneurial bug. I absolutely love it.
You've been bitten. Roy, what kind of advice would you give yourself?
I would say, you know, just believe in yourself and what you're doing, you know, and having sort of gone through this, you know, academic advisors are designed to train other academic advisors. So when you roll into the entrepreneur space, in some sense, away essentially from academia, that, you know, you just sort of have to believe, okay, this is exactly what you want to do. And it's just been a blast. We've had nothing but, you know, great success so far. So would not change that for a second. But, you know, there were some doubts there for a little while, whether or not that was something I should be doing. And yeah, I would tell myself, do it. Don't worry about it, man. You'll be fine.
Love it. I love it. Well, thank you. Thank you three for joining us on this panel. And thank you to the presenters from our distinguished universities. And I'm going to hand it back over to Jo Beth.
Yes, thank you so much, Danielle, Roy, Stu, and Kent. We really appreciate you and all the work that you're doing. And we're super proud of our rising stars here in Indiana. So thank you. And thank you again to our universities, especially Bryan Ritchie, for doing such a tremendous job of getting us back on track. We do truly apologize for the inconvenience and the disruption today. It's the first time it's ever happened to us. And so we're greatly sorry for that. We do want you to know we will be editing this video and we'll be posting it on our website like we normally do. So we'll have a nice clean webcast available for everyone to share. We'll also post all of the slides from today. There were some great graphics, some great contact information that we really want to make available to the public. So check out our website. Probably within the next 24 hours, we'll have it posted, and we'd love for you to be able to access all the great information that the folks presented today. And then finally, we have another frameworks already scheduled for March 10th. I put the link in the chat. You can register now. We're going to go back to talking vaccines, and we're going to hear from our healthcare supply chain on how we turn vaccines into vaccinations. So we're excited about that for March 10th, and we look forward to seeing everybody back then. Thank you again to everyone who attended. Thank you for your patience, and thanks to all of our speakers. Have a wonderful day.